Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first Korn Ferry Advance Ask a Coach Live. We are so glad that you are here. My name is Stacy Perkins. I'm one of the coaches on the Korn Ferry Advance team, and I am joined with 3 other coaches from the Korn Ferry Advance team. If you're a client of ours, you may recognize some of their names. I'm going to have them introduce themselves in just a moment, but wanted to just tell you a little bit about what we're doing today. We just wanted to have a forum where you could ask us anything career related. No specific topics, just talking about anything that you want to ask us about. We are right now, of course, in a really wild time in our world. So we have received a lot of questions about how to navigate during this time when we're all working from home, or maybe we're looking for a job and trying to figure out how to move forward. Maybe we're in the middle of an interview process, whatever it might be. So we did get a lot of questions around how to navigate this wild and crazy time that we're in. We also got a lot of great general career questions. So really hoping that we can get to all of the questions today. If not, please know that our hope is to do this on a regular basis where we can really engage with our clients and again, talk with you about whatever you want career related. If we don't get to your question, again, hopefully you'll join us for another session, or maybe you can work with your career coach to get that answered. Again, thank you so much for being here. Whether you are a current Korn Ferry Advance coaching client, or you just popped on to check out Korn Ferry Advance and see what the coaching is all about, we're really glad that you're here. I am going to go ahead now and have the coaches do a short introduction, and I'll wrap up with that. So Nancy, why don't you start? You're on mute.
All right, nice to see everyone through the screen, as many of us are doing now, working remotely. We have to adjust to that, but I'm a career coach at Korn Ferry, been here a little under 2 years. And for those of you who don't know me, I've got about 20 years of developing people and teams as a leadership coach, transition coach. I love working with people in transition, and we are all in a lot of that right now, individually and as a world, right? So I do have some degrees in education and counseling, and I'm also a certified coach. What else would be interesting? I like to bring a whole life approach to all of my coaching, and I think that's particularly relevant right now that we are approaching everything from a whole life. You can't just talk about career, everything else is intertwined as well, as we know. So, hail from the Midwest, worked at 3 different startups, all different industries. I'm gonna pass it on to David.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name's David Gonshansky. I too am a career coach with Korn Ferry Advance. I've been with Korn Ferry Advance for 2 years. Started off my career, actually started off coaching in a higher education space, and have been in the career counseling and career coaching space for 15 years now. Education, business degree, and I also received a master's degree in higher education as well as in leadership. And I'm excited to bring those types of principles, perspectives, and theories into the conversations that I have with people. I'm excited to be here, seeing how we can all be supportive. Like I said, this is trying times. Everybody's saying this is trying times, but irregardless, there's opportunities out there and there's ways that we can help. So looking forward to seeing how we can answer any of the questions that are coming up for everyone. Francis, your turn.
Thank you, David. So again, like the others, super happy to be here and hearing all of your questions. So hopefully we can come up with some good insights for you. Myself, my background is in human resources. So I used to work for Fortune 250, 500 companies, helping them treat people better. I'm also a business psychologist. So I have a master's in psychology and one in organizational psychology. So really, I try to use as much as I know about how businesses work internally in order to help all of you, which I think in these unprecedented times is particularly useful. I've been at Korn Ferry Advance for nearly a year now, So the time has flown, and we've got a fantastic team. I think you can see that all of us are really excited to be here talking to you and working with each other. So looking forward to some of the questions you're going to throw at us, Stacy.
Very good. Thank you. And again, my name is Stacy Perkins. I have been with Korn Ferry for 4 years now. My background is primarily in recruitment and corporate leadership. So I've led some pretty large international teams, so sometimes bring a little different perspective to my coaching. I have been coaching for a total of 7 years. I do have my degree in business communications. And honestly, I get out of bed excited to do this work every single day. So love working with my clients and just really enjoy being here. I am based in the Dallas office. We have 7 people, I think, now in Dallas, and the rest are remote. So, but you've met a few of them here. One thing I wanted to mention, if you have questions along the way, I know some people sent in some questions just before we started, so we are going to go through those. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, if you would please use the Q&A tab, not the chat, we will take the questions from there. All right, with that, let's dive into a few questions. Let's see, Nancy, let's start with you. What does a career coach do, and what is the value in having a career coach?
Mm-hmm. So a career coach, I like to think about it that we come from different backgrounds perhaps, but we all agree to meet the client wherever they are, regardless of what place in their career that they are in. And so that's really important to ask the right questions and to do the correct assessment initially to understand where are you, what are your goals, what are your values, where are you trying to go, and we can help you get there faster. We can make it a more enjoyable, less head-banging experience. There's a lot of official descriptions we could use to describe or definitions of coaching, but I like to put it in the layman's terms. It's a lot more fun, and you can get places faster with a coach, particularly with a career coach. You should always be managing your career, so there's no bad time to be working with a career coach. It's always a good time. The rules constantly are changing fast, quickly, and we stay on top of it. That's what we do. We stay on top of the changing trends and what's going on in career. So that's something that we can't expect everybody to be an expert in, but we bring that expertise to you, partner with you, design that relationship so that you can be successful quicker and get to where you want. So you're embracing a fulfilling career, meeting some of the goals that you've set for success. David, Francis, chime in.
I think you did a really good job there, Nancy. I think the only thing that I probably would add to the mix is that we really are cheerleaders for you. We utilize positive psychology to really think about how we can overcome versus solve problems. The focus is really just getting you to where you need to go to next, or help you to continue to build and grow to where you are right now. We again meet you there, so it could be anything from early stage career awareness, who you are and where you fit in the world of work, to, like Nancy said, I'm in my career a certain amount of time now. I'm just maintaining, trying to look at how to build and grow within that space and continue to create great opportunities for myself. But we're your cheerleaders, we really are. We're your thought partners, and as much as you want us to be, we're accountability partners as well. We get you from point A to B as much as you want us to.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. That was great. That's my favorite part of this job, is that cheerleader and coming alongside my clients. Again, wherever you are, if we're starting from first level, or you're, wherever you are, new grad, been working for 30 years. I love coming on the journey with you. All right, so let's go to the next one. In this day and age, not necessarily in this time right now with COVID and the situation we're in, but how important is a resume really? Francis, you want to chime in there?
Yeah, sure. So it's an interesting question. I'd say and there's many ways to answer it. So I'm sure that the others will chime in if necessary. So we say that a resume is worth about 10% of your job search strategy. So while it's not obsolete, we can't say that a resume has totally gone away, but we may want to think a little bit about how to make a resume work harder for you. And so, there's kind of two major offshoots of that. One is, we focus a lot on personal brand, your online profile. So how we could get, say, for example, LinkedIn working for you as an online resume. It's out there working for you all the time versus this one document that you keep updated and maybe saved on your desktop. The second thing is that if we are looking at resumes, we want to make sure this idea I say about making it work harder is that it's optimized so that we're using the right keywords, highlighting right skills and experience, and really tailoring it for each of the roles that you choose to use it for. So I think that resumes have changed a lot over the past few years. They have definitely scrutinized a lot more. It used to be, I joke a lot that it used to be like a job description with a name on top. And now actually we are trying to fit in so much from that search engine optimization feel, its format, its personal brand that's congruent with the online profile. So in sum, it's still important. We want to make sure that we're incorporating that as part of a broad strategy too.
And I would just add to that it's secondary to networking. And the ideal is to always spend the majority of your time networking. And this has happened to many great networkers or people who have taken that on very seriously, that they haven't had to use their resume, or it's been an afterthought. They've already been able to network, tell their story, highlight their LinkedIn, I would say, has to be pretty good because people are going to look at that first. And if you're doing effective networking, you are doing a lot of it on LinkedIn. And today, right now in this world, you're going to be doing it all right now on LinkedIn or email, some type of online. So it should be secondary. It has to be good enough, right? But when we work with people and if there becomes a tendency to really hyper-focus on the resume, we will, in our expertise, try to shift you off of that a little bit and focus you on some of the things that will have a greater return on investment for your time. We want you to work smarter, not harder.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think on top of that, sorry, go ahead, Stacy, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I was just going to say, yeah, I typically refer to a resume as a tool in the toolkit, right? It's not that thing that's going to get you the job. As Nancy said, it might be an afterthought if you've done all the other work, but it's another tool. Go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to add that, one of the things you want to think about when you are looking for a new job or just keeping your career maintained is what type of strategies that you're using. And one of the reasons why resume is still something that comes up a lot is it's something that's tangible. It's something that we know that we can do that can create an impact in some type of way. But one of the things I would, emphasize to anybody out there is there is importance if you want to use it in certain types of ways. But you have to think about how you're looking at the whole approach. And like has been shared with all the coaches already, the components of who you know and how you brand yourself and how you're coming across is going to create much more of an impact than having the right words in some type of document that might be captured or not captured by a computer.
Right. I had a couple of questions, follow-up questions to the resume. So I just want to throw this one out there, talking about the difference, or is there a preference or when to use a functional resume versus chronological? Thoughts, David?
Yeah, there's definitely a purpose to both. I do find that more often than not, functional resumes are used for career changers. So if you're trying to emphasize particular skill set, and by the way, I don't know if I need to take a step back to explain the two different types of resumes because a lot of people may not know what the difference is, but so just a quick brief overview of this. Chronological resume is just like it sounds. It basically shows your most recent job, the job underneath that, the job underneath that, and so on and so forth. Functional is more based on either a skill set or experience or something along those lines. So if you want to emphasize that you have very strong analytical skills, then you might pull bullets from different types of work experiences that showcase your analytical skills and have that under the analytical skills section versus talking this is the job and the analytical skill bullet points underneath that and so on and so forth. So that's a distinctive difference between the two. If you're a career changer, probably a little bit more valuable to have a functional resume. I don't know the science behind this, so I might need a coach to back me up. I don't know how applicant tracking systems, the computers, are reading functional resumes right now. They might be more prone to be reading chronological resumes because those are more common resumes out there. But if you're using it for branding purposes and you're using resumes to connect to people versus through computers, then there's a lot of value of doing a functional resume that showcases your natural transferability to a role.
It's also been used to eliminate a sense of gaps in a resume. And quite honestly, talking to enough recruiters, and Stacy, you would know this too, it actually can raise suspicion if you don't do it chronologically. So you're better off, again, there's no, everybody you talk to might give you a different answer, but it's what's right for you, what's going to tell your story the best. And again, it's not going to be your resume, it's going to be a conversation. Sometimes in a cover letter, you can allude to your story a bit, but they're not always reading it. So that's another consideration. But recruiters have said, and hiring managers, that it can raise suspicion, a functional resume. What are you trying to hide? So if you are using that functional resume, just be prepared to tell the story and be knowing it might raise some suspicion.
Perfect. Very good. Thank you. Let's talk for a minute about this new norm we're in as of the last 2 weeks. So right now, many people are worried about losing their jobs. What are some things that you should be doing if you're still employed, but nervous about a potential layoff? Anybody?
Yeah.
Nancy, go ahead.
I'm always happy to, I feel like I can say something, but you guys can chime in. So regardless of what's going on, it's always really important to make yourself valuable, make yourself indispensable. And I really think we should approach our careers that way every single day, not to hyper worry or hyper focus, but to be thinking, how am I adding value? If there were cuts tomorrow, do I have accomplishments and results that I can speak to? Am I continually growing and learning? And the other thing that goes along with that, am I letting people know about it? Because we as coaches work with a lot of folks who are doing amazing, amazing things. And then they're really disappointed because they're cut or they don't get the promotion. And we dig a little bit, we ask a lot of questions. Turns out nobody knew, but they made an assumption that everybody saw how hard they were working. And so there's this whole piece of self-promotion that we like to work with people on and make sure that that's getting communicated at work. And that wouldn't change regardless of what the world's doing right now.
Perfect.
So I'm going to add to that, if that's okay. So that was, I would have said exactly the same thing. I guess the complementary strategy for that. So we talk a lot about being indispensable. And like Nancy says, actually at all times, we should be, this should be top of mind. The flip side of that internal strategy is your insurance. And so we're probably going to say it again and again over the course of this webinar, but it's, now more than ever, it is really important for us to be reaching out to people, making sure that we are maintaining the connections that we have, not just for ourselves, but actually for everyone else. We've seen actually a really nice wave of people supporting each other. And I think that's something that, where networking doesn't have to be purely, oh, I might lose my job. But what if, you are being good with your networking, that means you can help someone else out. So, I don't mean purely an external strategy, because it could be actually you've got colleagues, peers at your current place of work that may be going through the same thing. How do you band together and make sure that you are supporting each other throughout whatever changes might happen? So internal networks, external networks, focus on your safety nets, your insurance strategy.
Yeah, you're both stealing my thunder. You know, pretty much the same thing. I think there's just a matter of being empathetic and being available to people. Sometimes it's just a matter of, you know, we all kind of jump to what can I do, and sometimes just being there and available to others. That other people are going through the same fears, problems, and what you could do is just be an extra eye or ear for them, and who knows, that type of stuff comes back around to you as well. You know, there's something to be said as well about just being prepared. You know, have you done what you've needed to do to update your LinkedIn, update some of those things we're talking about that are not the most important thing, like your resume, but are still necessary evils in the job application process? But just getting in the space of being prepared, letting your network know you're there for them, and seeing how that can help you along the line.
I would just build on this too, that there might be another piece. You guys gave me more time to think of. When you were saying insurance, Francis, I thought you were actually going to go to the place of, yes, you want to look internally, you want to be valuable and indispensable, but some insurance for you could be thinking about what are the trends? Where can I reskill to make myself either more valuable to your current role, or if I do end up, I mean, we are going to have potentially some layoffs regardless of how indispensable and valuable you are. Then what's the insurance? What are some other plans with retooling, reskilling, knowing yourself? A lot of times we work with clients that they're not really sure what their skills are, and they've just been doing the same thing for so long, and they haven't taken the time to maybe take an assessment, talk to a coach, find out from coworkers, do a 360. What am I actually really good at? I'm so good at it, I don't know that I'm good at it. That happens a lot. So really taking the time to know yourself, and maybe a place of reskilling or taking some certifications might be part of that insurance.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, let's talk about a different aspect of this. If you are in the job search right now, so say you are in the middle of the interview process, potential offer on the line, everything has slowed down right now. How do you stay top of mind with those companies you've been talking to without being annoying and trying to be sensitive to the time that we are currently in? David, you have any thoughts there?
Sure. So I think to start with, it might be top of mind to think if there's an opportunity to ask the question, when is a good time to check in? If they have an answer, then that gives you some type of indication of when is the best time to not bother them. So if they tell you it's going to take a little bit of time, we need to, see our way through COVID-19, then that might give you a perspective of where are we on the curve that's been talked about so often. Another thing to keep in mind in terms of how annoying or anything along those lines is to put yourself in the shoes of the person that you're communicating with. What for you would be considered annoying and what would not be considered annoying. I think there's something valuable in what I like to call being politely aggressive in the job search. You don't want to be completely forgotten, but you still want to let people know that you're very interested, that you think there's a great fit here, things along those lines. So if you think that a week is a valuable enough time to check back in with somebody, then let that be your standard. But if you say to yourself, if I got bothered a week later, that would annoy me, then that might be an indication to you that your time frame might be a little bit longer.
I also think it's how you approach everything. Like right now, it's taking a great deal of patience and emotional intelligence and balancing. And that's what, David, you're alluding to, like knowing the audience, right? Who's your audience and how might they be perceiving what you're saying to them? I also think if you're coming at it from a value standpoint, you're not coming at it aggressively. You're saying passion and value. I'm really interested in this. I understand there's things going on right now that are beyond all of our control, but I certainly wouldn't want you to lose sight of my interest in this position. So call it out. Tell the truth. I've even had people say, I don't want to appear aggressive or annoying, but I do want to be very sure that express that I'm very interested in this role. What would the timeline be that I should be expecting?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Nancy. I think that's really important, and that goes back to what we've all been talking about, being empathetic and just kind of saying, I know where you're coming from in that communication that you're having with them, and that's why I want to show sincerity in checking in with you and seeing how you're doing, but also want to reiterate whatever it is that I need to reiterate in terms of my interest or my passion or my space within this particular role that you have available.
Excellent. All right. Let's move on to talking about somebody who is later in their career. We've had several questions around this. This, of course, is not specific to, again, the time that we're in right now. But how do you navigate looking for a job when you're later in your career? And the specific that was given was 50 plus years old.
50 plus years young, right?
Yes, that's
yes.
really what. There you go.
Well, so much goes back to value again. Age is irrelevant if you can do the job, right? And however, it's a real thing. Age bias is real. And especially in certain parts of, I'm not gonna lie, West Coast, depending on what industry you're in, marketing, IT, there's certain industries that it's gonna be more prevalent when you're going to feel that. So there are little tricks that a coach can help you with around your resume that shouldn't be focused on. But you may want to take off some years or things that go way back, college graduation, unnecessary. But with that said, think from the standpoint of, can I do this job? And how am I going to get that across in my networking that I'm one of the best candidates for this position? So really researching, what is this company trying to do? What's their mission? Where are they going? What's the vision? How do I fit in? What are the problems they're trying to solve? Oh, that's what I'm really good at. I'm really good at solving those problems. So who do I need to talk to now that I can let them know that's what I do? And age is now irrelevant. If you truly don't have the skill set, that's a whole different story. Then we talk about reskilling again. So maybe if you are in a certain age group where you haven't had a certain certification that now is relevant, then that's really getting to know yourself and being honest with yourself. And a coach is more than happy to, we're cheerleaders, but we're also truth slayers. And we will tell you the truth if you are open to receiving the feedback that we really feel there's a gap here. And it would behoove you to consider a certification in this area. A lot of times you don't have to complete a certification, but you can start it, you can learn the language, you can then present yourself better in an interview and appear that much more knowledgeable.
Great. I will add something if that's okay.
Yes.
I think, so we're not saying ageism is not a thing at all. Like Nancy says, there are, so I think I'll make a point about that in just a second. But I think that one of the things that we work on a lot with clients, not just with the ageism piece, but actually with a layoff, say, or a gap on a resume, a lot of what we might be addressing is the framing. And we often get clients that come to us, this is a question that comes up quite a lot. And if you are particularly focused on any aspect of your experience or your profile, and that makes you talk about it more or talk it down or talk about it in a certain way that we could maybe turn around, because as Nancy says, it should be about value. Actually, you have, considerable amount of experience that you can bring to a role, broad experience that, especially at a time like right now, we're going to need to look to people who've got, the wherewithal and, the X number of years experience to help us all pull together. So there's so many ways that actually we would look at your experience and say, well, that's fantastic. What a strength. So the framing of it is very important. Sometimes we need to flip that around with a lot of clients. So that actually we're focusing on all the great positive attributes that you have. The thing I said that I'd make a point about is, I think this sounds a bit empowerment now, but I do think that if you are feeling, if you are experiencing ageism bias, that can be a really interesting filter. And so if you're talking to companies or talking to individuals and they are making you feel as though it's a thing, then you need to be starting to ask yourself whether that's actually some organization or, you know, a team that you really want to work with.
Perfect. Excellent. David, anything that you want to add?
No, you guys did a great job with that one. Not really much to add. I think I just would want to reemphasize what, you know, Francis said about the filter. I think sometimes it is an element of, is this an organization or a culture that I want to work for? But I also want to kind of put out there that there is reality in it, and then there's also the story that we sometimes tell ourselves. And I know that a lot of times when I've had conversations with people where ageism becomes an issue, it's because they've added that extra weight onto themselves and brought that into the room with them when they go into an interview or into a conversation. So are we going to allow that to be an excuse? I'm not saying you can't wash it away, but are we going to allow that to be an excuse? Or are we going to allow that to be something that actually makes us more powerful or a greater contributor to the environment or the opportunity that's given to us?
And I would just add one further point of negotiation or salary discussions, and that can trip up somebody who's in their career. It can trip up anybody in an interview, but it can particularly trip you up if you're further on in your career. If you are in that 50 plus wonderful experienced age group, then you might have some resistance to the question even more so, because you might be wanting a higher salary or you're used to a higher salary, and there might be something more than ageism. It might not have something to do with ageism. They may feel you're not affordable, and they could get somebody younger who wouldn't be as good as you, but they might be able to pay them less. And so working with, that comes up a lot in our coaching discussions, like what's the best way to answer what are your salary expectations? And it's important to understand your audience again. What do they need to hear so that you can move on in the interview process, that they can fall in love with your skill set and you, and that you're going to be the chosen one that they make an offer for. And at that point, you've got some negotiating power. So negotiating salary can also be a little bit different depending on what age you're at.
Great. Thank you. All right, let's talk about networking for just a minute. How do you network with somebody that you don't know? And coaches, if you wouldn't mind addressing in a normal situation, right? And then also, is that different now, you know, given this world that we are living in right now and these crazy times? So, Nancy, do you have thoughts on that?
How do you network with somebody you don't know? So because we can't be in person right now, I'm going to make this all about online. And again, you always want to try to start with finding somebody who might know them, a first connection, a second connection that could introduce you. And certainly if you can do a lot of tutorials on LinkedIn, but that's something that all of our coaches can help you with, how to do searches, how to see who you're connected with, if you're not as familiar with that. But if you clearly are, it could be a complete cold contact, and that's okay too. You can research that person, read their LinkedIn, send them a message that says something. It's going to be different for everybody, but hi so-and-so, I've been researching, or I've been following this company, XYZ company, or I'm really interested in what this company is doing. I see that you've been here for X amount of time. Really looking to add you to my network. That's all you're doing at that beginning, because you only have so many letters you can use when you're making a connection. LinkedIn cuts it short. So let them know that you like the company, something about them, and you'd like to add them to your professional network. And imagine doing this with multiple target companies and multiple cold contacts. It's a bit of a numbers game, but we're trying to get connected to a few people who then we can thank them for the connection. Thank you so much for the connection. Then reading up on them even more. I see that we both are from this area, or we both have certifications in executive leadership, blah, blah, blah. And so you're finding some commonalities. And at that point, you can ask, be completely honest too. I'm growing my network. I'm really interested in learning more about what the needs are at this company. You may or may not be involved with the hiring, and that's okay. I'm wondering if I could have 15 minutes to chat with you about your role. So, and that again is going to just be different depending on who you're connecting with, but there's lots of ways of just putting it out there. I am growing my network. I'm expanding my knowledge. I'm not necessarily asking you for a job. I'm networking. And I also like to add, if there's anything I can ever do for you, if any of my connections are people that you'd like me to introduce you to, do not hesitate to reach out. And Francis, you touched on this earlier. The best networking you can do is to be giving back. Do that first, actually. Give first so that you get back later.
No, it's interesting. I mean, a great. Go ahead, Frank. Do you want me to fill in first, Francis, or do you want to add on to what Nancy was saying?
Go for it. You'll probably say what I was going to say.
No, I'm sure. This is the most interesting thing about networking is that, you know, it's such a loaded question because it's very independent on the individual. I mean, we all network successfully in different types of ways. And this is what I want to say to everybody who might be interested. Come meet with us one-on-one because we can meet you where you are and talk about what works for you and what doesn't work for you, what natural talents you have, in the space of just connecting to people, because that's what networking is all about. It's about building goodwill. It's about just building relationships. So you don't have to necessarily go straight to, you work at name of company that I want to work for. It could just be about, I just want to know more about you, more about people in general. So it's unique. It's depending on the individual. If you're extroverted, there's a different way that you network than if you're introverted. I will say that I agree a lot with what Nancy is saying about trying to figure out some form of commonality, because your ability to connect to somebody based on something that you have in common is a great first place to start. And I think that's one of the most nerve-wracking parts, especially when you're dealing with cold calls, is if I can meet somebody somewhere where we have something that we could talk about, that's the comfort space that we can move forward with. I think another thing to keep in mind in terms of networking with others is spend some time thinking about what is the outcome that you're hoping to get through that interaction with that particular individual. I'm not just trying to build my network, but there's a specific reason why I want to talk to you. Because your ability to be able to communicate to them that you're not just trying to add as many people to your LinkedIn profile, that you specifically want them to be part of it, and this is why, and this is the commonality, then that's what's going to get people to respond to you more than a simple, I'd like to add you to my network, or I'm just trying to build my network in regards to that. Another thing, if you do get into the space, it's just my personal opinion, so fact, science, take it as is, but very important to keep in mind that when you do get to the point that you're having conversations with people, think in that giving mindset. Get people talking about themselves. Get people to give you advice from their perspective before you jump into, this is what I need help with, this is what I'm dealing with, da-da-da-da. Because more often than not, the more you get people to talk about themselves, the more they like you, and the more that they like you, the more that they want to help you.
That was perfect.
I feel like we could just have an ongoing conversation about networking. There's so much to say, because there's also the point that David's making about, get them talking, find out as much as you can, because that is great data for you to use for future conversations. So many reasons you can use to get back in contact with them. Oh, I saw this article that you might be interested in. Oh, I saw that this affected the county that you live in, whatever it might be. So, whereas if you go into that conversation talking about yourself purely, you then come out going, how do I get in contact again? And that doesn't feel so good. So I want to say two more things. One is more of a, I guess, logical, something you could give yourself a goal behind. So normal times and COVID-19 times. So you want to be building these networks or expanding these kind of connections steadily, ideally. And if you're doing it through one, we are not sponsored by LinkedIn, should say that. But if you're doing it through one particular platform, and say that is LinkedIn as the example, you're establishing credibility if you are starting to, so regularly over time, connect with people within the same kind of networks. So if someone sees that, oh, actually, we've got, you know, 2 people in common, they're more likely to accept the connection. So it may be something you can put a goal behind and say, okay, I'm going to reach out to X number of people. When it's cold connections, like Nancy says, it is going to be a numbers game. That's why we go on about warm introductions any way you can, as much as you can. And then the other thing that I would say is, if you do get to have any conversations, kind of going back to this point I was saying about you, the last thing that you want is to have, you know, get a connection and then feel like you're going back and asking again. So ideally you want to turn it into a conversation as much as possible, or at least use it for a springboard for something else. So if you can initiate these connections, you do get that, you know, initial conversation going. It's always interesting. Human nature is that we want to help each other. So, and sometimes, you know, we say, we don't want to say, I want a job right now. That might not be the offer. But if you're saying, from the person that you get the connection with, you know, who else could I speak to? Who else is interesting in this field? You know, who might you be able to introduce me to? Open questions. It means that the initial connection you have could then lead to a secondary connection. So then you have 2 people to follow up with, rather than having to always go back to those first few that you started with.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, you know, a lot of people will give them the assignments to network, and they'll come back and say, well, it sort of flopped. They weren't the right person. They couldn't help me. And so Frances, you're spot on that. So maybe they're not able to offer something, but you've now made this connection and you might be able to help them, which builds goodwill. But secondly, tell them what it is you're really interested in. You know, this works with recruiters too. Let's say a recruiter has reached out to you and they just are not even looking for the same type of job. You're wondering how they found you. But instead of seeing that as an annoyance or, well, this person failed or this isn't a good connection, well, thank you so much for this time together. I really appreciate the connection. What I hope is if you meet anybody who's in this industry or at this level, or if you know of a company that would be looking for someone, and let them know what you are and what you're looking for, because those are the great stories we hear all the time. People who go to a career fair, they weren't interested in any of the companies at the career fair, and then they meet somebody standing in line, and that person's spouse is actually hiring. So connections are connections are connections. I have a lot of fun stories like that. So and it works on LinkedIn too. You may connect with somebody. Don't ever think of it as a waste of your time or a failed connection, but use it to find another connection. And I don't mean use, but honor it and find another connection.
I think that a lot of my clients are really surprised once they get out there and they start looking at connections on LinkedIn. They're typically really surprised by how many people they actually do know. You know, and when you start talking about networking and starting with those people that you are already connected to and see who they can introduce you to. Mm-hmm. I've had quite a few. They push back a little bit and then they start digging in. It's like, oh my goodness, I know 4 people at that company, you know, that they really want to be at. So I think, yeah, we could, to Frances' point, we could go on and on and on about networking. I think we started the conversation when we were talking about resumes and all of that, of how important networking really is. So I want to jump back for just a minute. We've had several questions around going back to resumes for just a second. I know we talked about them as a tool and it's not the end all be all, but how to address gaps in your resume. I know we get this question a lot. I do, a lot of my clients ask me about that, but we've also had this quite a few times pop up. So thoughts, David, let's start with you. Thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it just kind of depends on what type of gap that we're talking about. Is it a more recent gap? Is it something in your past, things along those lines? And when do you have the opportunity to actually describe a little bit more about what you did during those gaps? I know a lot of people, they get concerned about the gap, especially if it's more recent. Maybe they've been job searching for a while, and some of the stuff that we've been talking about already in terms of reskilling yourself or volunteerism or things along those lines. If you're doing those types of things, those are valuable to possibly incorporate into your resume or be part of the story that you tell to people. You know, it's very dependent on the individual. I hate to leave it at that. I think that it's a good conversation to have with a coach because a lot of times people understand gaps, especially when you're talking to HR people. But Nancy or Francis, if you want to add to that, something that you want to just incorporate as well.
I think it goes hand in hand with not just your resume, but how are you going to tell the story in person too? So it's gaps, and maybe you don't think of it as gaps. Obviously you were doing something during that time, right? And so I had a woman who ran a swim team for 2 years, and she thought, I don't have anything in these 2 years. Well, once we put together all the skills that she used to run this swim team, we were able to pull out some really significant leadership and marketing. However, we didn't lie about it. This was a volunteer position. We called it out as that. You don't want to be dishonest, but you absolutely gained the skills. It's also okay to say, I stayed home and cared for an ailing parent for 2 years because my value, that's what I did because I valued that. And I would bring that into the workplace too, the loyalty. You can absolutely turn that into a positive. I think people understand that. If you have confidence in how you tell the story and you know why you made the choices you made, and that's again what we can help you with. It's all being truthful, but also again, you have to be able to do the job. So the gap is less important. It's more important to say, yes, I took 2 years off to do XYZ, but I'm ready to dive in and do this job because I'm currently up to date in all of these areas that you're looking for me to be up to date in. Then the gap becomes irrelevant. I can do the job. I can start tomorrow.
Right. Francis, did you have something?
Yeah. Well, I think I just want to nod vehemently. It's like David said about the story that you tell, and then Nancy echoed it. So I think for me, it fits a little bit in with the ageism type area, that again, it's one of those things that, or a layoff, that to us individually, and that's totally understandable, it was a big deal and we might have certain feelings about it. I think it's important to remember that in the majority of cases, HR recruitment teams are not looking to throw you off. They are not deliberately starting conversations to try and make you feel uncomfortable. That's the last thing they want. So generally these types of questions, what was it that you were doing between 2010, 2012? Why did you leave your last role? They're generally just conversation starters for us to start to get a feel for who you are. And so the individual feels a lot like, oh my goodness, they've shone the spotlight on the thing I didn't want to talk about, which is why we're saying actually the story that you tell is what's important, whether that's presented in personal branding or actually, in person. What is it that you want to describe about that particular time? Chances are, again, think from the HR recruitment side, nothing we haven't heard before. Hearing, in the US that someone got laid off from their job doesn't surprise us at all. Yes, as coaches, we understand that for you, that feels very different than it's going to feel to the recruiter. But chances are, if you've got a positive, professional story to tell, as Nancy's saying, you bring it forward. Why are you here? Can you do the job? Make the conversation about that, rather than feeling as though you have to dwell on, the 2 years back in whenever it might have been.
Right. Great. Thank you. So I want to be sensitive to time. We just have a few more minutes. So I'm just going to ask 2 more questions. I want to take this to the flip side. Now, I actually get this question a lot from clients, so I'm interested to get your perspective. I get the question a lot, and it's actually just come up like 3 times here. Is it bad to work at the same company for many years? So right now we're in this mindset, in order to move up in the world, you've got to move around every couple of years. What are your thoughts on staying at the same company 10, 15 years? And I'm going to jump in. I'll start real quick on this. My thought is, if you can show progression there, and even if you were kind of in the same role, but you were able to take on more and show that initiative, but I think overall people are looking at that progression. it is not a bad, it's not bad to stay at the same place for 15 years, and the loyalty that shows, and highlighting that work ethic. And there's a reason they kept you there for 15 years. You must have been doing a really good job. So I think really highlighting that kind of thing, it is not a bad thing. Curious, Francis, you are nodding away over there. What do you got?
I know. So I was laughing initially because I was like, oh, Stacey, is this your question then? So, but what I was going to say is, okay, there are a couple of different aspects of this. One is that you've been with a company 20 years. You started as an assistant, became a coordinator, you've got that linear progression, which actually, coach-wise, there's not such a thing anymore. We talk about career lattices, diagonal, lateral moves, all that kind of thing. But let's say that this is someone who stayed in the same job. So I'm an accounts receivable clerk, and that is what I've been doing for 20 years. Just because you and your title have not changed doesn't mean the organization hasn't changed, if that makes sense. So if you think about the work that you were doing 20 years ago, chances are it's going to be very different due to changes in tech, procedure, processes, even lines of communication, organizational structure. So actually you could still be showing some kind of taking on of new tasks over time without having had to have left that role. That was a complicated phrase. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Nancy, do you have something?
Oh, of course. Because you guys give me so much great time to think. I think there is something a little bit worrisome with our world today. It's not a bad thing to stay with one company by any means, but you would want to be aware of what else is outside there, right? So if you are choosing to be there, but you're very aware of what the market's doing in your industry, is your company that you've chosen to stick with for 20 years, are they staying agile? Are they giving you new learnings? Are they an old dinosaur and they're resistant to change? Because if they're not staying competitive in the industry and they go under or they get bought, all of a sudden you're without a job. So it's important to think of what's my plan B, even though everything's sunny and rosy and I am progressing or I'm doing a jungle gym of moves and learning a lot internally. If tomorrow that something changed, have you stayed competitive in your industry? Could you pivot to another company and do the same thing? And let's hope it never happens, because you're happy. You don't want to move if you're happy. But just having that awareness of, okay, I'm not going to worry myself, I'm not going to lose sleep over this, but I am going to manage my career and think about, who are my competitors if I did have to make a switch? Who would potentially want my skills? Who would I reach out and network with first? And those are the questions that I think you want to be asking yourself if you're sticking with one company for a very long time.
Perfect. So I want to ask one more question because I want to make sure that we cover this topic. We've had quite a few questions come in, and David, I'm going to ask you to run with this given your upcoming webinar, but talking about the salary conversation. So what to do if they've talked about a range, you could do this job, it's a great challenge, et cetera, but how to have the salary conversation during an interview.
Well, there's a lot of different theories around salary negotiation, and I love that you gave us kind of the plug. Not tomorrow, but next Thursday, everybody, negotiate like a pro. We'll talk all about this a little bit more. There's a lot of different types of elements you want to kind of take into account. Generally, and there's different philosophies around that, but generally it's suggested that the first person to mention a number is usually the one that's going to lose in a negotiation. So the hope is that you are able to somehow get focused on what's more important to you, hopefully, which is not the amount of money that you're making, but if this is a right fit, if this is a right job, things along those lines. So being able to ask questions around what do they have budgeted for the position, or trying to defer it by saying, I would like to know a little bit more about the job before I were to give you a number. Anything along those lines is probably going to work more to your advantage. Now, there's going to be certain circumstances where it might be good to put in a number, but overall, you generally don't want to be the first. Beyond that, Stacy, you mentioned salary, so if they keep coming back to you with a, but what do you expect? What do you expect? Stuff to kind of keep in mind is to give them a range. Give them a healthy range, $10,000, $15,000 range, but give them a reason behind the range. And make sure that the reason makes sense. So it's not just, I want to make $1 million to $1,015,000, but it's, I want to make it between 60 and 75 because this is the background that I have. This is what the market trends and what's competitive in the market's like. This is what I bring to the table in terms of my experience. And then possibly adding this is not only about salary for me. I'm looking at other things beyond this. I'm looking for fit. I want you to know that I'm flexible and negotiable. And I'm hoping that that's not going to be the reason that we end this conversation. You won't add that last part, but hopefully that gets to the essence of what I would kind of take into account.
That's great. How about just one more minute? Nancy, you want to go ahead?
Can I just launch the poll in case we lose anybody? We can stick around and answer more questions, but we'd love to get your feedback with a quick poll before the last question. So I'm just going to launch it. You should see it on your screen now.
Perfect. And while she is putting that up, I am going to just go ahead and wrap us up. Thank you again for joining us. Know that every Thursday at 12 o'clock Central, we are going to be doing webinars. We've been doing these for a few months now. We've had some great feedback on that, so please keep the feedback coming. But the webinars on Thursdays happen 12 o'clock Central. Tomorrow will be Love Your LinkedIn Profile, and as we talked about, David will be doing one on negotiation the following week. So you can check out the schedule on our website as well. But also watch your email and our social media where we'll be advertising the links to be able to register. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are really hoping that this Ask a Coach Live was really helpful and that we will go ahead and continue those in the future. So with that, again, want to thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to my fellow coaches for joining in today and sharing your great wisdom.
And I would just add one thing before you hop off. If there's a topic that you're dying for us to cover, and this was a free forum today, put it in the Q&A right now. We'd love to hear. If you'd like us to do a whole hour on networking, we're game. If you'd like to hear about salary negotiation more in this, David's going to cover it in a webinar, but just whatever topics, we will try to do our best to get that set up.
Agreed. All right. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Stay safe, everybody. Stay healthy. Take care.